Good evening. I'm Earl Butch Graves, Jr., CEO at Black Enterprise. Since our inception some 50 years ago, one of our core tenets has been promoting education as a means of attaining career mobility, developing business acumen, and achieving financial empowerment. In short, education represents the pathway to creating wealth for life. To a great degree, our unyielding focus on opportunities in higher education for Black Americans represents the manifestation of the legacy of my parents, Earl and Barbara Graves. As the founder of Black Enterprise, a proud alumnus of his beloved alma mater, Morgan State, and a trustee of Howard University, my father served as the ultimate champion of HBCUs and their mission to advance future generations of Black talent. My mother, a guiding force of our company, held bachelor's and master's degrees from Brooklyn College and taught elementary school a decade before Black Enterprise was ever launched. Each year at our Women of Power Summit, we honor distinguished luminaries with the Legacy Award bearing my mother's name for their fervent commitment to teach, support, and uplift promising students and young professionals. Today, Black Enterprise continues our proud tradition by advocating for educational equity, financial aid, student debt reduction, and occupational development for Black college students, especially those enrolled at HBCUs. We realize such measures are vital to ensure diversity within corporate America, as well as drive our nation's ongoing business competitiveness and innovation. For Black Americans, gaining a quality education is the key to fulfilling our individual and collective career potential. Due to the urgency required of these times, we decided that the topic of tonight's Black Enterprise, Economic Equity and Racial Justice Town Hall should be education, preparing the next generation for the 21st century workforce. There is no more important job for all of us than seeding and cultivating the next cadre of Black scholars, artists, business leaders, innovators, and entrepreneurs, among others. Across a myriad of sectors, however, we have much more work to do. Tech continues to be the most transformative force when it comes to jobs, investments, opportunities. As such, Black students must fully engage in this area if they seek to gain a more expansive role in shaping the future of the world. Black college graduates remain underrepresented among the burgeoning STEM segment of the workforce. In fact, studies reveal that African Americans are less likely to earn science, technology, engineering, and math degrees than in other fields. And our share of STEM jobs continue to be lower than other groups. Despite the recent emphasis on corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion, Black representation in STEM jobs hasn't budged in over a decade. As the #1 Black digital media brand reaching more than 8 million monthly unique visitors, we have used our town hall series to dissect such issues and develop solutions to promote Black economic and financial empowerment. This evening's discussion promises to offer analysis, commentary, debate, and action plans focused on getting students career ready, forging effective corporate collegiate partnerships using HBCUs as valued resources, and encouraging employers to reimagine how they hire and promote Black workers. We are extremely excited to have assembled a stellar panel to tackle these issues. Our town hall speakers include Suzanne Walsh, president of Bennett College, one of the nation's leading HBCUs. Bonita Stewart, board partner, Gradient Ventures, Google's early stage venture fund investing in the future of AI. And Byron O'Geist, CEO and co-founder of Opportunity at Work, an organization charged with rewiring the labor market. This session is led by our dynamic moderator, CNN commentator, attorney, and activist, Bakari Sellers. We also invite you to join this powerful conversation by sharing your questions and comments via the chat feature. I would like to extend my appreciation to our presenting sponsor, our good friends at Walmart, and tonight's host and town hall series sponsor, the Executive Leadership Council, the preeminent global organization focused on developing Black corporate C-suite and board leaders. Now, before we begin our conversation, we will hear from our good friend and partner, ELC CEO, Michael Heider. Michael?
Thank you, Butch. And thank you, Black Enterprise, for hosting this important discussion on the importance of nurturing the Black talent pipeline today to secure the legacy of Black leadership tomorrow. I'm Mike Heider, President and CEO of the Executive Leadership Council, and we are proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the Black Enterprise Economic Equity and Racial Justice Town Hall Series. Tonight's Town Hall is all about education and how we can help ensure that no Black child is left behind by preparing them for the workforce of tomorrow. At the ELC, we believe our young people are our future. And we underscore that belief by nurturing promising young talent through our ELC Scholarship Program for Black college students. Scholarships are currently the pinnacle of our philanthropic giving because building the pipeline of the next generation of Black executives is one of our North Star goals. That's why the timing of tonight's town hall is particularly special. In just 2 days, we will be honoring our 2021 ELC scholarship recipients at our annual recognition gala and 35th anniversary celebration. This year, we awarded nearly $1.5 million in scholarships to 117 of the brightest Black college students across the country. Of these distinguished scholars, roughly 60% attend an HBCU, 60% identify as Black women, and many are pursuing degrees in STEM or business fields. Our ELC scholarship program is just an example of how our philanthropy can inspire students to take their talents from the classroom to the boardroom. An integral part of the program is our honors symposium. Our scholars are required to participate in a series of professional development experiences led by ELC members, career coaches, and trained leadership development faculty. The symposium allows our students to directly benefit from the advice, expertise, and experiences of some of the most senior Black executives in corporate America that comprise our membership. Another marquee program for college students is the Black Male Initiative, which goes beyond scholarships to address the systemic academic achievement gap facing young Black men with respect to college enrollment, engagement, and matriculation. These opportunities expose young people to a wide range of career, industries, and corporations, all with the goal of increasing the number of future Black business leaders. Investing in education has always been a key driver of the ELC's mission. It's important to us because we've heard the mistruths, we've heard the misconceptions about the Black talent pipeline. Let me be clear. There is no shortage of qualified Black talent. The so-called pipeline problem is a myth, and we have the talented, driven ELC scholars to prove it. The real issue is lack of opportunity, and we're here to ensure that Black students are empowered, inspired, prepared, and motivated to become part of the pipeline and step into their roles as future Black leaders of tomorrow. Now, before we go to our town hall, I want to extend a special thanks to ELC member Benita Stewart, Vice President of Global Partnerships at Google, and board partner at Gradient Ventures for her stellar work in preparing the next generation of Black leaders in tech and for representing the ELC on tonight's panel. I hope you enjoy this important discussion on education.
My name is Bakari Sellers. I'm a CNN political commentator. I am a father of twins, a husband to Ellen Rucker Sellers, and a former South Carolina state legislator. In fact, I often tell folk I am the best type of legislator, which means I'm retired. But today I get an awesome opportunity to moderate this panel. This is a panel sponsored by Black Enterprise on something that we need to focus on. The title is Education, Preparing the Next Generation for the 21st Century Workforce and the 21st Century Global Economy. It's kind of funny that I am the one moderating this. I was born in 1984, and I have a 16-year-old who recently referred to my birth as the late 1900s. So I feel some sort of way about that. But as we kick off, I want you to know that we somewhat switched the focus of today's panel. And I have to thank the individuals at Black Enterprise for helping us hone in. We were going to talk about the role that the business community has on making sure that we rooted out many of the systemic inequities that we see in our education system. But instead, I think we're talking about something that's a little bit more substantive and something that can stick to your ribs. We're going to talk about preparing for post-secondary education and in turn, employment for the 21st century workforce, something that my sister institution, Bennett College, can help us with the increased flow of Black students to HBCUs, college affordability and retention, the flow of students to STEM, which will drive global business and occupational careers. We're going to talk about tech. We're going to talk about all of these great things because I have an amazing panel here with us today. And you've seen over the past 3 or 4 town halls that sometimes I talk too much. Today won't be that day. The reason it won't be is because I have Suzanne Walsh, the president of Bennett College. Now, Bennett College is an illustrious, historically Black college and university, located in Greensboro, North Carolina. It is also the sister institution, and we're just very, very happy to talk about Bennett Bells at Morehouse College. So I love you with all of my heart, and shout out to, you'll have to tell me about the artists behind you when that time comes. Those are beautiful pieces. Also have Benita Stewart, board partner at Gradient Ventures, which is Google's early stage venture fund investing in the future of AI. I want to make sure I got that right. And I also want you, in your first answer, Ms. Benita, if you can tell us a little bit about the mission and goal of what you're trying to do. And last but not least, I have Byron Ogis, the CEO and co-founder of Opportunity at Work. And Byron, I've been working all morning to make sure that I got your name pronounced correctly. And so I want to say thank you so much. And the work that you all do is fascinating. So as we start off on this topic, before we delve into some of the more detail-oriented questions, I wanted you to give us a 50,000-foot view of some of the challenges. The way this town hall is going to flow is we're going to outline the challenges briefly, but then we're going to get into the meat of the solutions. So talk about some of the challenges from your perch. We'll start with you, Dr. Walsh. Talk about some of the challenges you see as young people enter your institution and preparing them for a 21st century global economy or a 21st century workforce.
Thank you for that question. And I think some of the challenges, the mythology about what is the 21st century, what does it look like? What are the jobs? So excited to be joined by Ms. Stewart today. Really excited to hear about her work as well. I think that one of the things that we need to think about in the 21st century is what role can especially Black women play in areas that we've been left out of historically. And I don't mean just computer science. So people always think, oh, tech, STEM, that means computer science. What we're really interested in at Bennett College is thinking beyond the traditional tech and thinking about the things like algorithmic justice. How do we think about artificial intelligence from a perspective of a liberal arts institution? How do we think about the ethics related to these topics? How do we think about the issues related to gender bias, to racial bias, all kind of hiding behind these STEM fields? So I say that because I think when we think about the 21st century, sometimes we say it's all about STEM and the liberal arts, and the arts part of that are thrown out. And we see a role for combining, as Steve Jobs talked about, the best the best jobs and the best ways to solve problems are through an interdisciplinary approach, combining the arts and STEM. So when I think about the 21st century, I think about finding those roles for Black women that maybe have been a little bit hidden before now.
Before I let you go, please explain to us what's algorithmic justice. I can't let you just use those big SAT words and not define it, because that went right by me. So tell me what we're talking about when we're talking about algorithmic justice.
And I feel like Ms. Stewart is also going to have some thoughts on this. So if I step on anything, just interrupt me. So when I think about algorithmic justice, think about all of the things that are part of an algorithm. The algorithms are built with some bias in them. The bias comes from the folks who are behind building those algorithms, and you see in them some gender bias, you see racial bias. I'm not saying it's intentional, but it does clearly exist. And so when I think about algorithmic bias, there's a great book called Algorithms of Oppression, which I think is really important for folks to read. And then there's also an Algorithmic Justice League that exists at MIT. And this is really looking at things like how algorithms are built, and we can actually have some influence in trying to think about where social justice is in the coming years. So social justice isn't just out in the streets, it's actually online. And so the algorithmic justice is to fight that gender and racial bias that's built into algorithms like that sell you things online, that are in Instagram, those sorts of things.
Ms. Stewart, I think that's a natural segue to you. From your perch, tell us about some of the challenges that you see. We're going to get into the playing field that you're attempting to level when it comes to tech and ensuring that we have a place in Silicon Valley. We have a place with our HBCUs in building those partnerships. That's going to come next. But talk about some of the challenges that you see in preparing young people for a 21st century global economy.
I think first of all, thank you for having me here and just representing Google. I've been with Google for over 15 years. So I will say the future is tech. I've served in multiple roles. I'm not an engineer. However, I have represented just the opportunity. And I do think what we need to do, and the biggest challenge that we have, is attracting students, attracting our community to technology. And so if we just think back regarding our history, reading was fundamental. And when we think about the 21st century from a workforce perspective, tech is fundamental. And how can we actually think about attracting more students to the excitement of technology? We need to make sure that we're represented in all aspects of technology, from the engineering to the emerging areas of artificial intelligence. But there's also the engineering side of tech, whether it's HR or legal or sales or the business side. And so I do think the major challenge is just making technology attractive. And so that is why I have personally put myself out, as a role model to say, this is what it looks like. I was the first Black vice president, female, at Google. And so you can be an executive. And I think it's our responsibility within the technology industry to make sure that we are serving as role models. And then on behalf of Google, we want to do our part. And we have been at this for a long time, but the biggest challenge is the hurdle is just the attractiveness of technology. We want it to sit there alongside entertainment, alongside being a doctor or being in the legal field or being, in any other profession. But we do think it's fundamental to just advancing our community as well as thriving in the workplace.
Ms. Stewart, you got me thinking. I'm gonna come back to a question after we get Mr. Ogeeston. I have a question for you. But Byron, from your perch, talk about some of the challenges that you see in preparing. And please, the work that you all do is completely fascinating. So if you can integrate that into your response, I would greatly appreciate it, and explain to people a lot of the work the substantive work that you all do.
Right, great. Well, let me put it in terms of what we talked about, jobs of the future. And I do think that term is interesting because, of course, we don't just sort of pop into the future by magic. We flow into the future with the institutions we have or the changes we make to them. And so at Opportunity Work, we think a lot about what are the institutional changes, what are the ways we talk about rewiring the US labor market. And thinking about that in terms of jobs of the future and opportunities for all Americans and African Americans in particular, I do think something that Bonita said is very important. Tech is not just the tech industry. Tech it pervades all fields. So a tech-enabled job, if you think about it, you might not be developing software, but you're certainly going to be using software, and you're going to be perhaps evolving that software. But it's in the context of interaction. So it affects sales, it affects creativity of all kinds. And so I think it's best to think about technology more as like a common language or a set of tools that you might apply in the technology industry, but frankly, you might apply anywhere else. And if you have those tools, they're just going to be opportunities that are available to you in this sort of middle wage and higher wage jobs with upward mobility and adaptability that I think are very powerful. So I don't want to lose that. That's very important. And Opportunity at Work, a big part of what we're doing is we're focusing on enabling 70 million Americans, including over 10 million African Americans who don't have bachelor's degrees, but who are skilled through alternative routes. We call them STARs, skilled through alternative routes. And they have skills, which relates to the second big point, which is there are a lot of jobs in this country today that are relatively low wage. And we tend to just leap to, oh, therefore they're low skilled and therefore people need skills. But low wage is not the same as low skills. And if you actually look at the work that people in many, many low skilled jobs, whether it's home healthcare workers or even as, let's say, a server in a high volume restaurant or many other essential worker jobs that we saw in the pandemic, we saw them, reconfiguring supply chains and changing, health protocols on the fly. These are actually skilled jobs that are low wage. And a big part of what we do is to try to help companies think about their talent pipeline. And in this case, for example, their talent pipeline for Black stars as not just being those coming out of college, but actually the almost 2/3 of Black workers in the job market who don't have bachelor's degrees, but are attached to the labor market and gaining skills. And I think there's a real role for technology there too, which finally relates to something that both Dr. Walsh and Bonita have referred to, which is leadership and the access, not just to operate effectively within a system, but to help to set the rules and help to create the rules of the system. And I think a legislator helps to do that, but actually someone who develops an algorithm and who sets a hiring system in place helps to do that. And we focus on this a lot at Opportunity at Work because largely when you think about the risks to the future, I think it's not so much technology, so much as our kind of economic system. So it's, don't fear the tools, change the rules. And I think we need more people coming from a wider range of communities and Black communities in roles like Bonita's, in roles like Dr. Walsh, where they can actually play a role in changing the rules. And I think long-term, that's going to help us all a lot.
One of the things that Bonita mentioned, and one of the things that I want to highlight now, I was going through my list of kind of topics and questions, and I want to push back on all of you all just ever so gently, because I think I come from Denmark, South Carolina, where we got 3 stoplights and a blinking light. We live in a food desert. But the number one issue we have to tech, or the number one barrier we have, is accessibility. There is a question about accessibility, and there's a question that comes along with distrust that's inherent in our community. How do we overcome that lack of accessibility? How do we meet people where they are so that we can then cure some of the ills that both of you all have, all 3 of you all have laid out? Byron, I'll start with you, and then I'm really interested to hear. I know Google's doing amazing work. I'm interested to hear Ms. Stewart and Dr. Walsh, some of the work that they're doing at Bennett, because look, if you're recruiting for HBCU, you literally have to meet students where they are. So I want to hear from all of you all on how we overcome these challenges.
Well, Bakari, the first thing I'd say is people in your town and in a lot of towns think, they fear that they're not getting access. They think they're not getting access. because they're not really getting access. I mean, in other words, they're not wrong in their fears for the most part. And that's not to say that that's all at the feet of tech companies, because obviously there's fundamentals, like, do they have access to proper broadband infrastructure? Do they have access to the kind of the experiential learning with actual up-to-date kind of software tools of the sort that you would apply? I mean, there's many barriers, and I don't want to minimize them at all, because they absolutely are barriers of place. There's historic underinvestment in Black communities and Black education. But I think the other thing that's going wrong here is that the society is implicitly deciding that if you haven't got everything you need by 18 to get to where you want to get to by 22, then we're sort of writing you off and saying, well, we got to work with 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds. But that's not true. Like, people are learning all the time. And most of what we know that is valuable at work, we've learned on the job. I don't want to diminish school or college. Obviously, that's incredibly important foundationally. But all of us here have been paid to learn our whole careers. And we are actually learning is sort of fundamental to what we do. And it's not because we are the only people who can learn. Like the people in your hometown who maybe didn't go to college, or maybe went a year and couldn't afford to stay, or frankly, never thought that they could go. They have talent. They have skills that actually we need to tap into as a society. Because sometimes people will say, well, I don't know if there's going to be work for people, but work is solving problems. And the last I checked, we're not running out of problems. So we shouldn't be running out of work. The problem is, how do we translate these tremendous needs? Work is building things. Work is fixing things. Work is caring for people, healing people, entertaining them, educating them. Work is creating new systems. There's so much work to do. And yet we have systems, both public and private, that are leaving people on the sidelines. Something as basic as, how can you say that we want everybody to, equal opportunity, to sort of go for it, try your best, and you don't even have broadband access to modern services? That's maybe a little bit on the public sector side. On the private sector side, how can we say, hey, you should come? We have a skills gap. We have 11 million open jobs right now, by the way. But guess what? Companies who say they have a skills gap, they screen out 70% of applicants because they don't have bachelor's degrees. Let's be clear, prior to assessing any skills, right? You haven't assessed their skills and found them wanting. This is the most basic algorithmic bias we have today. The most widespread is simply to say bachelor's degree required. By the way, over 70% of jobs for administrative assistants today, new job postings, say bachelor's degree required, even though 2/3 of today's administrative assistants don't have bachelor's degrees. So in other words, it's not really required. It is a barrier, and it is a barrier that disproportionately harms African Americans, actually disproportionately harms rural people of all races, rural Americans of all races. About 70% of both of those groups don't have bachelor's degrees, and about 80% of Latinos. So I think there are some basic things we can do to open up opportunity. And that is not the end of the story, but in a lot of ways, that's the beginning. And I think that, combined with education and combined with some of this great innovation in the private sector, can get us much further.
Dr. Walsh, I want to hear how we overcome those barriers of trust and accessibility, because look, I want us to get to a 21st century workforce and global economy, but there seems to be we're going to have to jump over some of these barriers first. Can you talk about that for me?
Well, the trust issue is huge. And that's so the reason that I'm really intrigued by notions about algorithmic justice are Bennett's history, as the history of so many HBCUs, is grounded in social justice and civil rights. And when I started to look at where is the future of social justice and civil rights, to me, it's in two domains, especially when it comes to Black women. It's in the domain of health and technology. And as I said earlier, it's not just about being a computer scientist, it's all those other roles that we've just been talking about that are related to technology. If we narrow our understanding of technology to you must be a computer scientist, you must be a programmer, we're going to lose out. And so the trust or the distrust is actually grounded, I think, in the idea that all of the jobs have to be fancy, that all of the jobs have to be engineers, you have to be a PhD. And as we've just talked about, there's actually a range of those roles. And part of what we're committed to as we're evolving is we're saying we want all students to have some sort of experiential learning as part of their educational model. And so as we think about that, that gives people an entree before they even graduate to try out different careers. I think the more we're introducing technology in a way that, the language used to be prosumer, meaning I know how to produce and I am a consumer. How do I kind of combine it? Because we love technology. It's not like our students don't love technology. It's not like the community doesn't love technology, but we don't see ourselves as being able to be participants in the creation of it, the production of it, because it's always at the fanciest of ends. And as I said earlier, for me, when I think about a liberal arts institution, we have something to say about the misogyny and the racism that we see that's in some of these algorithms. So there's sort of roles for philosophers. I like to also think about in the world of video games and esports, a video game is nothing more than a liberal arts experience. And what I mean by that is that it's really a narrative. It's an improvisational exercise. So you can think about, those of you who are, into English or writing or journalism, somebody has to score it. There's a musical score. So there are all of these roles, I could go on and on, that don't require a PhD, don't require you to be an engineer, but you can be a participant in the creation of that technology. And I use that because to me, that's accessible. No matter where you live, we're right here in East Greensboro. There is public housing right across the street from the president's house. And so we don't have great Wi-Fi in this area. Our neighbors, when they access the internet, they're going to find a hotspot somewhere else. We just don't have great access, but that doesn't stop them from playing video games. That doesn't stop them from using technology. The question is, how do they see that as something that they can be part of? How can they say that, oh, you know what? I like to write rhymes. I like to write music. They may be doing that here in the neighborhood. We have some neighbors a couple doors down who sing every night, family. They just come out and they sing. If they could see themselves as creating that musical score for that next video game, that I think is kind of an interesting way to think about access to technology. So it's making, I think, number one, making the invisible jobs that are in the tech industry visible, giving a range of jobs, and also giving a set of experiences while students are in college or while our neighbors are out kind of exploring what the options are. We don't want them to think that you have to come to Bennett to get those jobs.
Ms. Stewart, I know that you all are doing a lot of work, and I know one of the things that you carry into those corporate suites, the C-suite at Google and throughout your 15 years there, I don't want to say the burdens of this accessibility, et cetera, but ensuring that all of us have access to that technology. Talk about some of the things that you've seen. And even if I may, can you talk about how it's changed over the last 15 years from your perch and what you've seen? Because I anticipate it's probably changed rapidly.
Yeah, first I will say that we're invested in the talent infrastructure, the skills infrastructure. Byron was talking about that. And we know that the HBCUs are actively shaping the next generation of Black leaders and are helping to build a more diverse workforce across all industries, including tech. So in doing our part, we want to support these institutions. So we have a long-standing partnership with HBCUs to achieve these goals. We know that HBCUs produce anywhere from 25 to 27% of all STEM graduates. So the fact that these students, have committed to STEM, we have collaborated with the HBCUs in a number of ways just to prepare students, because it is a competitive field as a software engineer. So if they're preparing for an internship or eventually full-time roles at Google or other technology companies, there's a number of things we've done. One is the Tech Exchange, and this is very near and dear to my heart because I actually co-founded Howard West with Dr. Frederick. And it was to bring in, not just to bring our expertise to campus, but to actually create more of a lived experience. And it's experiential. What if, in fact, we brought the students to the Valley so that they could have just a more experiential view of technology. And at the same time, we have our Computer Science Summer Institute. We also have our BOLD internship program, which is designed to not only focus on engineering, but also there are all these other areas within technology. And earlier this year, we also launched the Pathways to Tech so that we could build equity within the HBCU computing education. We also want to help job seekers, find these tech roles and provide opportunities to accelerate careers. We've also expanded our Grow with Google Career Readiness program. Now we're at 20 schools. And in fact, it's the impact that we're having. And I do think how has it changed? We have more applicants now, more interest in terms of what we're doing. Our cohort of the Tech Exchange, 95% of these students rated their overall experience as positive. So we've reached over 4,000 students through our Google in Residence program. And we believe every day is an opportunity for us to get this right. So we will not be deterred. We have invested. In fact, this past June, we announced a $50 million unrestricted grant to 10 HBCUs as recipients of this, so that they could think about how they would want to craft the program in a bespoke way for their school. And I do want to share just a personal story, because my father was a graduate of Bennett College. He was a history major, and he went on to become one of the first African-American pilots in the U.S. Air Force to fly the B-58, which was Mach 2. So I do know that you can come from a liberal arts education, and if you are exposed and if your talent rises to the top and you have perseverance and you're supported by a number of allies, you can make it through to any field that you would like.
Ms. Stewart she ran through all my transitions and my next couple of questions. I was going to highlight some of these programs. I'm over here going through my notes like she hitting all of these topics. Slow down. Like this, I know this is live, but slow down. But please, we created a Morehouse of the North. We just call it Harvard. But talk about what the Howard West is, because when I was reading about this program, it was so dynamic. So please talk about what went into it, the leap of faith that Dr. Frederick, who by the way is an actual surgeon who practices medicine while he is a president of an historically Black college. I don't know how he does it. Great guy. But talk about that relationship between the private sector and historically Black colleges, Ms. Stewart, and what Howard West is. And then Dr. Walsh, after she finishes, I won't jump in. I kind of want you all to flow. You mentioned something that's of great import. You talked about the fact that Bennett is near public housing. Most historically Black colleges and universities, save for Hampton, are kind of in the hood. We are located there where we have to create not only that human capital and infrastructure, Byron, but we also have an opportunity to be a base for broadband, everything else, et cetera. So talk about the role of historically Black colleges, not just from the level of job creation, but actually physically in those communities. So Ms. Stewart, I'll start with you.
Yes, so Howard West, and first of all, I'm a Howard alum, and I'm a non-engineer. And we had a very important meeting when Dr. Frederick was first named as president of the college. Vernon Jordan took him on a tour. And so he actually
of course the story has to include Vernon Jordan.
Of course. But he assembled a number of the alumni as well as allies, in New York City. And just hearing the vision that Dr. Frederick had for Howard University, focused on excellence. And I always tease him that he's creating Wakanda. And I said, what could I do to actually support the vision. And there were examples of Cornell. If you know, Cornell is in Ithaca, but Cornell went to New York for their medical school. Now they have their computer science school. And I said, well, what if, there was a Howard West, and Dr. Frederick had already spent, much time in the Valley. And so we just had a common interest in terms of doing something quite different. Howard, we had a longstanding relationship with them. We were supporting their faculty, which is also very important. I think everyone focuses on the students, but we actually invested in the faculty so that they could have the latest from the industry and project-based type of training so that they could adjust their curriculum. So we focused on the students as well as the faculty. And in creating this more of a lived experience, it was not just bringing the students, but we brought the faculty along as well. And so we envisioned this program to be very bold and to have long-term outcomes that would leverage Howard's existing, incredible high-quality faculty, and then combine that with Google's expertise. And in fact, when the program first launched, we just had this outpouring of support from Google employees. They just wanted to volunteer for the program. They wanted to teach as part of that. And I will say that some of the other HBCUs had a bit of FOMO, fear of missing out. I saw that on some of the social media, but we knew at Google that this was a pilot and that we would bring other schools along to participate in that. And that's why we have the Tech Exchange today, where we have actually expanded the program. But it was in a typical technology fashion where we would basically do a beta and Howard was willing to actually come along and participate in that beta.
That's dope. Dr. Walsh?
Well, I love this whole approach, and I think it's actually really new. I think for a lot of HBCUs to even be part of betas. So I love this discussion, and I think so. If I was going to say, what's the beta opportunity for Bennett College? I think there's this beta opportunity to say, how can we support the efforts in this community of East Greensboro to help expand broadband access? Because, even in the warm up for today, just doing a tech check, my video froze because here I am in East Greensboro, and it's just, we don't have amazing connectivity. A lot of time, and I've had these discussions with our elected officials here in North Carolina, who at first were sort of surprised, those who are newer to their roles, that they thought, oh, the digital divide is rural versus urban. No, actually, urban within urban is a challenge. And so one of the things that I think we have an opportunity to do is, as we are trying to improve connectivity for our students on campus, and we still have students who are virtual and who have tech-enabled options off campus, how do we think about how we improve our student, faculty, and staff experience? And then how can we be part of improving the opportunities for folks in the neighborhood to also have access to technology? That, I think, it has become ever more apparent in a couple of ways. One is when everything shut down during COVID, folks didn't have access anymore because the public libraries were closed. We weren't open physically. And so for people who were maybe relying on going to the library to access the internet, they didn't have that anymore. So it became ever more apparent that people just don't have access. We had faculty and staff who actually did not have access to internet at their homes. So this really, I think, has the pandemic has really further showed us some of these divides. The next thing that we saw is that it's great that for accessing vaccines, you have to, you can go online and make an appointment. What if you can't get online? And so we in fact are a community vaccine site. And so people can just walk up. But even with that, again, there are all of these pieces of this world of accessing the vaccine, and then what happens after the vaccine, and accessing if you've received one of the gift cards. Now it's going through the state and you access that via email. I give all of these examples because everything is tech enabled. And on the one hand, for those of us who have access to technology, that's great. It seems like it's a lot easier. But if you're in the neighborhood and you don't have that kind of access, that's a challenge. So I think in terms of opportunities for further sort of beta examples of what can be done between HBCUs and the community, I think we really do have to think about not just improving broadband on campuses, but how do we make sure that we are making that, whatever we've done, make that accessible also for the neighborhood.
You know, Byron, when I do these town halls, it's like an embarrassment of riches because I get to listen to brilliant people, and then I get to take things you all say and put them in speeches people pay me for. And so I give you credit sometimes, but I am going to give you, Byron, credit for defining work for us, which is the solving of problems, and also helping us acknowledge that we all got to this point because we have an insatiable desire to learn as much as possible. One of the things I wanted you to dig in on, though, and I think that you're probably an expert in this, is something very tangible. Talk about the type of training that Black students and Brown students need to receive from secondary school to college. Let's hone in on what type of training is needed and necessary, something you see every day, so that they can not just, and one of the things we're talking about, guys, and this is my HBCU experience coming out, but we're not talking about just going into or being ready for the 21st century global economy. What type of training do we need so that they can excel and be the very best in this economy, Byron?
Well, I think that's a great question. And I've really been loving listening to this conversation, and it's just got all sorts of ideas flowing that I think, I think the second part of your question, Bakari, is the one to focus on, which is this business of excelling. How do we do better? Because I think so much of the discussion, and there's a lot to say about the inadequate resources, some shortcomings that K-12 education say that might disproportionately affect African-American students. Like that's not a bad discussion, but I think it often happens just in terms of catch up. And I'm happy to go back to that, but I really want to focus on what the current situation, as challenging as it is in many ways, and the history as damaging as it's been in many ways, what that means for what could be Black people, Black institutions, Black communities' superpowers, seriously. Because the fact of the matter is, maybe it's inspired by the Wakanda reference, Bonita, but here's the thing. Talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. Talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. We all know this inherently, but what does that leave us? What does that mean? And why is it? Because there's a lot of pain in that, but where's the potential in that? Well, in financial markets, if there's asset classes or if there's, sort of valuable things that are there, if there's value that's under-recognized in financial markets, there's a whole industry called arbitrage that makes billions and billions and billions of dollars by recognizing there's less value attributed than there should be and investing behind what's undervalued because it's actually much more valuable than currently understood. And so that's one way of looking at it. When we so at Opportunity at Work, we focus more on people who are in the labor market, who have education, and a lot of them have some college education, but they don't have a bachelor's degree, but they do have skills. And we've actually created a database of the skills of all jobs, the skills distance between every job and every other job. Because if you're doing a job, I know you have skills because that job requires skills. And if you look at it, we see that 40%, there's 70 million stars, people who are skilled through alternative routes of all kinds, of all backgrounds. And about 40% of them, 30 million, have the skills for jobs that pay at least 50% more than the ones they're in. Now, 40% of them. Now zoom in on African-American stars. There's 10 million Black stars compared to about 5.5 million Black college graduates, so almost twice as many. And actually 60% of Black stars, over 6 million, have skills for jobs that pay at least 50% more. In other words, Black stars are 50% more likely to have these skills that they're not being deployed. Why? Well, because we also have a database of 140 million job transitions over 10 years. And what you see is that when Black stars make a job change, they're only half as likely as a white star to have it be a pay increase, a significant pay increase. It tends to be more lateral. So in other words, the same barriers that Black people know we're experiencing in the job market, right? Those same barriers mean that there's this enormous pent up talent pool, right? And the same thing applies. I mean, we have lots of evidence that HBCUs outperform relative to how is somebody coming in and how are they coming out. HBCUs absolutely on average outperform other universities for Black students. So why aren't we taking more advantage of it? I love what Bodita was talking about Howard West and the tech exchange, but put together some of the things we've been hearing. What if we made leading HBCUs, what if we made Bennett College and others a centers of multiple levels of empowerment in the same way that Stanford University, became for Silicon Valley? What if you had, for sure, broadband, yes, like high-speed broadband, like really high speed, like next generation high speed, so that you could, because that's what you need, by the way, not just to consume, but to create, right? And to be part of creating. And what if in addition, you had areas that you had centers of startup development, right? I mean, that this is an area of Bonita's expertise. She can speak to it. And what if in addition to that, you had not only people being hired into Google, but you had people being hired into startups in that area. And you had Google and other tech companies and other financial services companies that are really tech companies, and lots of companies are basically tech at their core. Now, what if they were all investing and making sure that they were tapping in to that disproportionately undervalued but incredibly valuable talent, and that ecosystem was being created? And what if, just as a kicker, what if this network was not just trying to do the same thing as the networks around, say, Stanford or MIT, but what if there were centers of excellence in how to make algorithms unbiased? What if the political science and public policy departments were trying to figure out how to accomplish this economic development without gentrifying it and displacing, right, the people living around the school, but how to have them included in it? And what if, back to your question, Bakari, what if these were centers that were partly focused on how to bring the best tools of learning, right, to communities around them? What if Black schools in East Greensboro were getting the best, not just the catch up from 20 years ago? Because one of the things I think about a lot in AI, and I've spent some time with it, most of my career was in tech. I'm also not an engineer, but I was working with tech companies for 15 years. Honestly, I think the best application of machine learning is human learning. Like an AI, is an amazing meta technology that could, for learning and trial, and then you layer on virtual reality, augmented reality. You could have virtual pre-apprenticeships. You could have young people sampling hundreds of jobs rather than the 5 jobs that they currently even know exist, right? Or what they do. Like these technologies. So in other words, technology is not gravity. And this idea that technology is going to take everyone's jobs or mean you have to have a PhD, that's not about technology. That's about the rules of the game that we put in place. And that's about where we invest and don't invest. We can change that, and we need to change it. So I just want to take this up a level, because I think that we've seen in COVID that we actually have a system that we don't just want to rebuild to where it was, that we can't continue in this sort of, frog in boiling water way, that we actually have to take all the assets of this country, which certainly include an amazing tech industry, but also include an incredibly resilient and adaptive and undervalued Black community and Black institutions that has a tremendous amount to offer, not just itself and the Black community, but this country and the world. And I just think we need to take that seriously.
Byron just challenged us to dream with our eyes open and reimagine what our HBCUs should be. Dr. Walsh, how do you take that challenge?
Oh, I was on it. I came off mute immediately. Let's do it. I mean, I think, part of what I really appreciate about what he's saying too, and I think about just the physical atmosphere around Bennett. We don't have tall walls and fences. I mean, we're very porous, and yet we're always in the top 1 or 2 safest campuses in North Carolina. And I say that because, to me, back to Bakari, your first question about trust. I think that people are able to trust Bennett in a different way because we're very open, to the community. And as we're talking, I should just pause and mention that Bennett College was recently ranked by US News and World Report as #1 in social mobility for national liberal arts institutions. And as I say to our folks, I didn't say #1 on this street or in this town, #1 in the nation. And so I say that the social mobility is important because it gets back to what Byron's talking about. I think of that what HBCUs do well, and Bennett does it particularly well, is to take folks from where they were before they were at Bennett, and we're able to take them to the next level in terms of thinking about intergenerational mobility. And so if we play on that history, if we play on that openness of our campus, then what does that look like beyond offering traditional degrees? And it is something we're thinking about. We're trying to explore what are those options for opening up the campus, both sort of physically and from a tech perspective, meaning, virtual options and so forth. And so one really maybe small, but I think very promising example is we have a program for 3 to 5-year-olds on campus. And we've just partnered with Guilford Child Development to run that center for us. And we've said, we want to work with those parents. So it's a Head Start program. How do we work with those parents to make them comfortable, or to allow them to access information, to access courses? We don't just mean college courses, but what is it that they are looking for that could help them to be further their social mobility, help them to think about what they might be able to do and to dream bigger than maybe they are at the moment. So I think that I love this idea. I love the idea of thinking about HBCUs as centers. And I love the idea of a center of excellence that's really grounded in the neighborhood. A lot of times in academia, when we talk about those centers of excellence, we mean research excellence and we mean national excellence. I love how do we connect to the community and say, no, we're actually, this is about excellence for our community. And we're open to and for the community. I have a lot of notes. So Byron and I will be plotting the future of HBCUs together.
I love it. I absolutely love it. One of the things that I did pay attention to and hear is that Ms. Stewart graduated from Howard University. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that there's a Howard West and Ms. Stewart graduated from Howard University. With that being said, though, Ms. Stewart, maybe you can tell the audience about the responsibility that Black professionals have, particularly HBCU alums, in helping us get our students from secondary institutions to colleges or HBCUs, and then make sure that when you're in your job, that you are continuously doing the work necessary to improve the plight of Black students, because we've changed the name of this now. This is not preparing for a 21st century workforce. This is preparing to excel in a 21st century workforce. And so what responsibility do you feel like you have? And for those individuals who are watching, our audience, just so everybody's aware, are a lot of professionals. And we need to make sure they understand what their role is and don't just say, man, damn, that was a good conversation. Like, they need to leave here understanding that they have a challenge too. So Benita, talk about that responsibility that I'm sure you have, or there would be no Howard West.
Yeah, I do think there is a responsibility, and I appreciate the notion of let's level up a bit. So we're not closing gaps. We're talking about empowerment, because the talent is abundant. And so the talent meeting the opportunity, it's like preparation meeting opportunity. We are prepared. But when you are in these environments, there's an opportunity to really impact so many different areas. So for example, we have our Grow with Google, where we have a certificate program. So if in fact every company needs a data analyst, and so why wouldn't we be part of certifying individuals that are not graduates, of college, but certifying them with these skills? So if they actually have this Google certificate, it says that they have actually completed and they have the credentials and the talent to be able to succeed. I think for those of us that are in the companies, we have to support all of these programs, not just one program. We have to be kind of the umbrella, looking at all the programs that are going to make a difference. We also have talked about entrepreneurship. I mean, it's just like bursting at the seams right now. When you think about all of the new technology that's going to come out post the pandemic, it reminds me of the late 90s, early 2000, when companies like Google really had their start. And so we are now investing with Google for Startups in Black founders. We have our second class. And we have Black founders, not just in the US, but we have Black founders in Europe. And so we are looking at innovation. And I do think for those of us, that are in these roles, we may be in only for a short period of time, but we need to make sure that we create allies. And because we can't do it ourselves, we have to create enthusiasm for allies, because we know we didn't get here by ourselves. And so having the allyship, I do think is important for our community, so that you have others that are willing to invest as well, so that you're not doing it alone. That you're not doing all of the DEI programs, but you're bringing in the allyship that is required, the responsibility, making sure that individuals, if I'm leading a team, making sure that individuals are receiving stretch assignments, that they're getting the feedback that they need to thrive. Because at some point you have to thrive in the workplace. And then we need to make sure all managers are responsible for creating that sense of psychological safety and the sense of belonging and inclusiveness in the workplace, so that everyone can thrive.
So we have about 7 to 10 minutes left, and I want to try something here with you all. This may go to all hell, but at the end of the day, it's my show, so I can do whatever I want to do here. So I want you guys, because we have a very entrepreneurial audience, but we also have individuals on this panel who are just amazing. I want you guys, and I'll start with Byron, if you could sit across from a Google in the private sector, or Dr. Walsh at a HBCU, tell them what you would need from both of those institutions, from the private sector and Google, to help Black students succeed. And then Dr. Walsh, I'm gonna have you tell Byron, I apologize, Byron and Benita, what you would need at Bennett to make sure that Black students could succeed. And then Benita, the same. I want how Byron can help you, and what you may want HBCUs to do more of to help Black students succeed.
All right, terrific. So I start. In my work at Opportunity at Work, I am trying to allow, let's focus on the Black community, 10 million Black stars, skilled or alternative routes to rise, to gain earnings. You can see for 60% of them, they should be making at least 50% more. How do you get there? Some of that is skills, but honestly, an enormous portion of it, particularly for that 6 million, is access and trust, credentials. How do people know they can do the job? So I'm very familiar with the Grow with Google program, which certifies based on a skills-based people, whatever their educational background. And it's a great program, and we've been collaborating at Opportunity at Work with it. What I'd love to see from Google in this case would be to expand that program, which it has been doing, to make it continue to make it more widely accessible to those in the workforce, not just in specific programs, and very importantly, to work to make it possible to activate that on a much larger scale, including beyond Google's own proprietary system. So Google did a very interesting thing in its job search, and not many people know this, and I wish everyone would do it. Did it a few months ago. It made it possible to use the Google Jobs API to do searches based on which jobs don't require a bachelor's degree, won't exclude you, even if these are high wage jobs. And it's shocking that until that happened a few months ago, there was not a single job search platform that allowed that. In other words, companies routinely use them to screen out people without bachelor's degrees, but people without bachelor's degrees, stars, didn't have any way of screening out companies that were screening them out, right? And by the way, they still don't really have a way because the Google API makes it possible to do in a scalable way, but it hasn't been done in a scalable way. It should be done. And it should be done because in that we're done, what Opportunity at Work would do with that very specifically is we would then essentially have, when we go to companies, because we have now a couple hundred companies and we're going to have thousands that are actually plugging in to StellaWorks, which is essentially it's a one-stop source to say, if I want stars talent and I'm not sure where to get it, that's validated for the job, I can go here. And when I go here, I can see, oh, they've got a Google certificate or other certificates. I can see they came from this training program or this community college source. I can see they were in this job with this skill set plus had this added program. But so we're building that slowly. But you may have heard a thing or two about Google search capability. It's actually pretty good. And so if you were able to apply that across the board, we could then have all the jobs there. And when a company came, we could just light up that portion that they were willing to take seriously. I just say that because that is an example of Google, not just as an employer, right? And not even just as a philanthropist, but in its core abilities to change the world, to intentionally change it in a way that would light up opportunity. By itself, that wouldn't solve the problem, but it would allow social entrepreneurs like my organization and others to really go at it and to take advantage, and really to elevate this undertapped talent. And I mean, it's not just Black people that will benefit from that, but absolutely disproportionately Black people because of the undervalue, and actually very disproportionately Black women, because it's crazy how much Black women's talent is undervalued. I led a high-tech services practice for McKinsey for many years. And the number of times you go into a data center, call center, and when you started asking the tough questions, they'd end up pointing you to a woman. More than half the time, it was always a woman, more than half the time a Black woman who'd been there 15 years, who trained the last 6 managers and who knew what was going on. And I just kept wondering, why isn't this person running the data center? Why? And so and there's a lot of bias in that, like degree bias, racial bias, gender bias for sure. But the point is, if we can make that visible and we can make it easier to win competitively, right, for companies by doing that, and I think Google can make a huge contribution. And I've already said what I think I want Bennett College, because I think in so many Black communities, I mean, they're not these sort of anchor institutions that you can build around, and you need them. You need a point at which resources can flow and then be open to the wider community. So yeah, Suzanne, I'd love to work with you on that. And Benita, if you can kind of get us, if Google, with this search thing I hear you do, if you could get us that data on all the job opportunities, and I think people should be investing in more, because if we can show you the talent pool, not the degree pool, but the talent pool, right? Then there should be more attraction for companies to invest. So those are my two.
That's perfect. That's what we're looking for. Some challenges, some things we can all do better. And Benita is pretty good. I think coming from Byron, the work that Google is doing is pretty good. I take that as a high compliment. Dr. Walsh, Bennett College, you have Google here, you have a social entrepreneur here. What can you utilize? I know you're going to the mailbox looking for a check, but what else can Bennett use?
Exactly. Thank you for helping me with my fundraising. I think, first of all, I love this idea of making the invisible visible. And so on that, I actually would say one of the things that I would love to see from Google is, what are those non-tech jobs at Google? So I did not go to an HBCU undergrad, but I went to Cornell University undergrad, and I took a class called Cooking for Non-Hotel Students, or we called it Cooking for Non-Hotelies. And I say this because I'm thinking, what's the Google for non-techies? You know, like what are those roles? What are those many roles that you talked about earlier that are filled by people who are not engineers, who are not PhDs, who maybe, you know, not even master's degrees, and to Byron's point, they may not have bachelor's degrees. It sounds like there's some work being done there, but I think it would be really interesting to be able to have our students. We have journalism students, we have media studies students, we have all of the social scientists. There are roles at Google, but those students don't see themselves there because they don't think that there are those opportunities. So I think there's an opportunity to show for those who are not in an engineering program that there are lots of opportunities at Google. The other thing is, I think that this research is like at least 5 years old, maybe older. But I remember at one point in time, Google had done some research about people in the management roles at Google. And oftentimes those folks had liberal arts backgrounds. So like your dad from Benedict College, you know, having that research background, I think that liberal arts background really made them over time very appealing as candidates for management roles. So I think redoing that research about what is the path or what's the trajectory to those leadership and management roles. It's not just a path through technology. So I mean, my main challenges are around the what else beyond what people presume happens at Google. What are those roles beyond what people presume at Google? And then I think for Byron, I think it's your challenge to me would be really helpful too if there were a partnership, a formal partnership that relates to those certificates or certifications or that kind of programming. Because I also think one of the things we've done at Bennett is we reinvented the semester. So it's not 16 weeks of 5 or 6 classes. We have mini mesters. So students do a 2-week session, which is where they take their 1 credit or special topics, and then 2 7-week sessions where they only take a couple of classes at a time. And I say that because the more that we can make things into sort of bite-sized, manageable kinds of constructs, it helps to decrease cognitive load. But it also gives more opportunity for our students to have experiential learning. So they could do internships with Google, or they could be working on certificates or certifications, or people in the neighborhood could also do that through us. We really do think as we head into our new strategic plan that our connection to the community is critical. I'd taken from you the idea of being a center of excellence for the community, which I didn't have on my list in that phrase. But I think that's a really great opportunity. But that being able to say, we don't have to, especially a smaller HBCU, we don't have to have all of these people on faculty and staff. Actually, we can get experts from other places, whether that's through your work, Byron, or Benita, through your work, being able to access people who can help to bring these new skills, new resources to campus, I think is essential. So those are my 2 asks in addition, as Bakari says, to our fundraising, but those are our asks.
And I'm a yes for what it's worth on my part. I think you're onto something. And in terms of like the credentials that would matter and how to break them up, we maybe can help with that. Would be happy to. The private sector obviously needs to bring the jobs, so I'll defer to Benita.
Benita, you are at Google and you're sitting in a perch where everybody always asking you for something. So now to make your job easier, what would be your ask of the social entrepreneurs like Byron and the HBCU presidents like Dr. Walsh, even if it is just go be more prepared when you come ask me for something. So what actually is that ask, Benita?
I would say we have a trusted partnership, with the HBCUs. We also, just with our certificate programs, what would be helpful is, because you have a trust within the community, is to be that megaphone for us so that there is just there's just a ramp, it's almost a rampede, a stampede that's actually coming toward technology. And it's so fast and furious. We want a stampede. We want all of the students. We want to be able to highlight. People can go on right now to Google and look at jobs and look at all the jobs that are open and that are available. But we need the trusted partnerships, quite frankly, to showcase that technology is a viable profession, and that anything that you could do to create these centers of excellence, to showcase all of the programs that we have available. But we're going to continue on. We're undeterred. But if you could actually promote and be that megaphone for technology as a profession in all of the ways that you have outlined, because it's being technology enabled, that's important. And that's really everyone. In all sorts of different cross sections of professions. And so that would be my major ask, is continue to promote technology as the profession and opportunities that exist.
Go ahead.
I just briefly say, and we do have great partnerships with Google and with Walmart and others. And I think we are certainly out there all the time talking about those opportunities in tech. But I would just add that we need a wider set of companies, right? Because at the end of the day, most people are not going to work for Google. That's no insult to Google. That's just, most people don't work for Google. So we need a much wider set of companies adopting this demand signal, this state. We're looking for your talent. And that's why I mentioned Google search, because those companies can't build up their own search. But if that search engine allows that companies to just plug in, I just think, well, we'll certainly be out there plugging them into it. So I just think we can't solve these problems. We can't seize this opportunity alone or by accident, but we can do it together and on purpose. And I think that's really what this discussion's been about. And frankly, that's what the future's got to be about if we're going to have the future we want.
And Byron, you're dead on in terms of that's what we do best, quite frankly, is develop products where the technology provides the scale. And so I absolutely appreciate what you've said about the search API.
All right, y'all, I'm closing the program out now, okay? This has been so enriching. I want you to know that this is the fourth one, and each one gets better and better. I've learned so much from all three of you guys in your various roles and perspectives. And my mom and dad would always say that the two most important words in the English language are the words thank you, and they're not nearly said enough. And so thank you for helping us level up, helping me level up this conversation. Thank you for everything that you have done, everything that you are doing, but even more importantly, everything that you will do. So this has been another great town hall, another great episode of our town hall meetings with Black Enterprise. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you so very much to our panelists, and we'll see you at the next one. Have a blessed day.
Thank you for joining us for this Black Enterprise Economic Equity and Racial Justice Town Hall on Education. Hi, I'm Derek T. Dingle, Executive Vice President and Chief Content Officer for Black Enterprise. We would like to thank our dynamic moderator, Bakari Sellers, and all our speakers for their illuminating and impactful conversation that will inspire us to take immediate action. We would also like to extend our deep appreciation to our Town Hall series sponsor, the Executive Leadership Council, and presenting sponsor, Walmart, for their partnership in producing tonight's program. Remember, you can engage in on-demand viewings on blackenterprise.com, and we encourage you to share your thoughts and comments using the hashtag BETownHall. Black Enterprise is the #1 Black digital media brand with more than 8 million monthly unique visitors. And as such, we present content offerings to enhance your business and financial lives. So mark your calendars for our upcoming town hall sessions on Black women on December 2nd, Black business development on January 13th, and criminal justice reform on February 24th. Also, you don't want to miss our virtual summits, Women of Power Tech on October 27th and 28th, and Black Men Excel on November 17th and 18th. For more information on our events, go to blackenterprise.com/events. We learned from tonight's conversation that we all must play a role in educating the next generation and building the talent pipeline. However, To maximize our impact, we must act now. Thank you for joining us.